Now, the cost of food is an ongoing issue. We have riots in parts of the Middle East. And the next issue that I'd like to talk about is there's concerns raised that many people will look at it and say it's the farmer's fault. That's why we have a higher cost of food. What is your party's food strategy? David, your thoughts on a food strategy for Canada?
Well, I think just in reflection to what you said, I think we need to realize how blessed we are in this country that we have the food supply that we do, and we have the systems in place that we do in order to protect our food supply, because many of these things we take for granted. Other countries don't even have them in place, and so I think I'd start there. Obviously, there's a huge challenge to putting together a national food strategy. We're trying to deal with diverse groups of processors, the producers, the consumers, and trying to bring all of them together under a system that works and that doesn't cost an exorbitant amount of money. We've worked hard in the last few years in terms of processing and food safety and putting regulations in place that will protect our food standards. Obviously, with producers, we've been working. We talked about our business risk management programs here a few minutes ago, and how we've tried to support producers as they're producing good and safe and abundant food for our country. And then in terms of dealing with the consumers, we're trying and we're ensuring that the food that they're getting is safe, that the standards are high enough that they can be comfortable when they go to the grocery store, that they're getting food that is good for them and nutritious. And I think one of the challenges is to make sure that we can do all of those things without building a huge bureaucracy that then takes even more of the profit out of farmers' pockets.
Dwayne Filson for the Liberals, your thoughts on a national food strategy?
Well, the Liberals have put together a national food policy, and the first item on its list is food safety, and it's so crucial to make sure that our food is safe. And one of the things that we want to do is apply the same standards to imported food as to our domestic foods. We also want to make sure that part of the strategy for healthcare is health, and that part of that strategy is eating healthy, and that we want to make sure that opportunity exists for Canadians. We talked about the clean slate commitment to improving business risk management programs for farmers. We want to make sure farmers can make a living. We want to also take care of the environment. We want to strengthen support to our environmental farm plans, and we want to pay farmers for wildlife habitat, and we want to pay farmers who are able to sequester carbon. And our fourth point under our national food policy is that we want to provide international leadership so that we can have trade deals that work for Canadians and work for farmers. And also we want to have be able to help those most vulnerable nations with their own food supply and their own food production.
Okay, and Larissa Shasko with the Green Party?
Well, Green Party MPs will develop a national agricultural and food policy framework which will improve food safety, provide food security, reduce corporate control of the food supply, support local food markets, improve agricultural research, ensure fair trade, stop the loss of agricultural land to development, support environmental stewardship, and assist farmers in climate change adaptation. And in addition to that, just going into a little bit more detail, we will ensure the quality and wholesomeness of food by strengthening the monitoring of pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, growth hormones, non-therapeutic antibiotics, and insecticides in food production, processing, and storage, with the goal of an orderly reduction in detectable residues of these substances until they reach undetectable limits. We will implement the mandatory labeling on genetically engineered food and food products. And we will also ensure that we are not worsening the global food crisis by growing grain and turning it directly into biofuels. We know that from an environmental standpoint, it doesn't make sense to be growing grain as well and turning it directly into fuels. Sometimes the greenhouse gas production can actually be higher than using gas itself. So we support biofuels only from agricultural and forestry waste products. And that is a greener method. In addition to that, we believe that farmers can become decentralized producers of renewable energy, and therefore more money can go directly to the farmers.
Okay, and Fred Clipsham for the NDP.
Thanks, Jim. You know, it's this weekend for families across Saskatchewan will be gathering for Easter dinner, and it's a special time. It's a special meal. It's made with special love by by people in their kitchens. And as families gather around the table, wouldn't it be nice if they really spent some time thinking about where that food came from and how dependent we are on farmers? Now, Jack Layton did a tour across Canada, the Food for Thought tour, to develop a strategy on how we can have a national food strategy. And here's some of the things he came up with. First of all, let's look at what's happened on the farm. 80,000 farms, fewer farms in Canada than there were 30 years ago. 30 years ago, there were 70% more young farmers. And I guess that's where I'd like to start, is what are we doing to make sure that farming will work for young men and women, and they can get going on the farm and have a farm future? So we got to start there.
I was calling in about two major issues: the young farmers. We need to encourage and entice young people to stay on the farm, and we need to mitigate that risk because they're taking on more risk every year. And it's all in our programs. Our programs are designed to increase productivity, which is good for the grain company and the railroad, fertilizer company and the chemical companies. But it's farmers are basically shaking the dice for $1 million and rolling it and seeing what happens every year. And to continue a strong, sustainable agricultural base, we can't continue doing that. Now, I would say that instead of tinkering with the policies, we need to have a brand new policy, something that farmers have been asking for the past 20 years under both governments. And what we're doing today isn't working. We keep tinkering with them, and it's just creating, or I guess the end result is less and less farmers, fewer farmers, and bigger farmers. And we're going to end up with 30, 40, 50, 200,000 acre farms, and that's going to be the norm. And that's not what Canada wants. That's not what the world wants. That's not how we get safe food. So I suggest that we have a complete review of all our policies. None of them are working. Half the farmers don't take them, and those farmers get absolutely nothing out of the federal and provincial coffers because they're not involved in the program. So if they're not working, why are we continually saying, let's fix them?
Ron, it's easy, though, to say we need a new policy. You have to give a little bit more detail. What do you got in mind?
What I got in mind is that you pay the farmer like we're spending $1 billion in Saskatchewan now between the federal and provincial government on crop insurance and all the rest of them. And we got maybe 50 million acres, including pasture. That would tell me that $20 an acre is where we're at. And I think we can make an environmental payment of $15 to $20 an acre. Let the farmer take the risk that they think they can afford. It will keep a lot of young farmers on, the younger farmers will stay because they're mitigating their risk. And if the grain companies and the fertilizer and chemical companies want me to grow their product, then they'll come to the table and they will take some of the risk. Like, it's a completely transparent, and it's a program to me that says it's commercial.
Yeah, Ron, I appreciate your idea. I have to give my guests enough time to respond to that,
enough.
So I'll let you go now.
Thank you.
But thank you. But okay, I'll start with you, Fred. Respond to what Ron's suggestion is.
Yeah, well, and thanks for the question, Ron. That's kind of where I left off, was the young farmer and making sure that the young farm family has a future in Saskatchewan, in Canada. You say mitigate their risk. Well, one of the problems with crop insurance is that if you have no history, you pay a higher premium. And I wonder if there's something we can do about that to equalize the premiums, to recognize that a young farmer has probably got an awful lot of farm experience, but operating his own farm, he doesn't have that experience, doesn't qualify for the standard premium. So there's something we can do about that. Farm debt is up about 3 times what it was 30 years ago, and that can crush a young farmer if he comes into a year where he's not getting returns. So these stability programs are absolutely essential. And as I said earlier, what we need to do is separate the disaster program from the stability program. If we're going to look, for example, at cap and trade, if we're going to look at rewarding the farmer for keeping carbon in the soil, if you have a year like last year where 10 million acres weren't seeded, then there's an awful lot of payments that weren't made under that cap and trade system. And so how do we, that's another good reason to separate these programs. And environmental services, Jim, is something that I've been working with APAS on, wearing my SUMA hat and talking about if wetlands are kept and managed by the farmer, then that trench doesn't come into a stream, doesn't wash out a culvert. And that saves rural municipalities, it saves urban municipalities actual cash money for not having to repair that bit of infrastructure.
Larissa, if you would respond to Ron's question.
Well, I think that you raise a really interesting idea, and I agree that we do need a brand new policy on this area in our country. So I'm interested in learning more and researching more on this issue. What I will also comment on is that the importance, as I mentioned earlier, of making the family farm the primary unit of production. And for centuries, family farms were the foundation of our society and our economy, especially here in Saskatchewan. But over the last 5 decades, federal policies and subsidies and changing technologies have shifted our food production from small, ecologically sustainable family farms to giant agribusinesses. And this shift has given multinational corporations control over our food supply. Meanwhile, farmers are increasingly reliant on off-farm income to survive. So we need to make changes to address this, including encouraging and supporting the consumption of locally grown food.
Wayne?
Thank you, Jim.
Wayne Filson with the Liberals.
We have the commitment from the Liberal Party to look at farm programs. I know that with the amount of money that the federal government puts into a program like crop insurance, and then so many people don't take crop insurance, it seems fair to think that a $15 to $20 payment would really help those people who are not interested in taking crop insurance, but still deserve some consideration. So I'd certainly take your program under consideration.
Okay, and David Anderson with the Conservatives.
Well, this is one of the biggest challenges that agriculture faces, which is trying to get young farmers into farming. It's been that way for a long time and continues to be. We've tried to adjust the programs to accommodate young farmers. We've worked on the AMPA program, which is the advanced program. Just the other day, Jerry Ritz extended the deadline for the spring advances, the Canadian Wheat Board spring advances, so that farmers have another few months to pay those back. I think that we need to talk, though, about one fundamental difference between ourselves and the other parties, and that is that we have made a commitment to keep taxes down. And these are things that directly affect the cost of production for everyone. We've lowered them. Liberals have made it clear that they want to raise taxes, particularly corporate taxes, which will affect the small family companies and corporations. The NDP have also made it clear they want to raise taxes. We know how volatile property tax issues are in this province. Mr. Clipson himself has voted twice in the last 2 years for 4% property tax hikes in Regina here himself.
That's
we
in
need
a
to know
city when you need to have some increased property taxes. David, I have to stop you there.
We need to know how much more they're going to cost us.
Keep taxes down, but keep rail rates high. That's a great solution.
I want to thank you all for joining me.
Thanks for watching. And remember, our election is May 2nd. And you got to get out and vote. Voice your opinion.